This Git video is not going to be like ones which you have seen before. If you want just a video to learn how to use Git, how to use GitHub, there are a lot of great resources on the internet. Head over to Free Code Camp and check out Eddie George's video on Git and GitHub. In this video, I'm going to show you how to make an open source contribution which adds value, and I'm going to take you through the entire process. For this video, I'm going to use a sample repository which me and my friend Leon have been wanting to make for a while, and it is in line with what we have covered on the channel previously. So let's get started with that. Alright, so right here we are in the repository which we're going to work in. Now, to give you a brief overview of what this project is all about. This is a repository where we want to make bite-sized information about all things related to Linux. So for example, we want to put in some sections related to navigation. Like you can run these commands. These are how you will navigate through a Linux system. This is what the command will do, so forth and so on. So this repository still has to be created. We've only created the README so far. Now I'm going to walk you through how you can start contributing to this repository. So first things first, when you head over to a repository, the first thing you want to do is check out the README file. So over here, we have just a very basic version of the README. Now this README right here just shows you what's the motivation behind this project, and it's telling you how you can set up a Linux distribution as well. Now, once you've checked out the README, you want to head over to the Issues tab. And right here, we have created just one issue. And within this issue, we have a list of things which we want to make bite-sized information about. Now, I'm not going to touch on any of these in this video. Rather, I am going to create bite-sized information on what is Linux. If you want to go ahead and contribute to this repository as well, feel free to select any one of these topics, learn about it. You can use some of my previous videos to learn about these topics and create the information yourself. I will show you how the entire flow works. Talking about prerequisites. I already mentioned this in the introduction of the video. You need to know how to use Git. If you don't know how to use Git, I will show you in very simple methods about how to use Git to create an actual pull request. Now, before getting on to the actual hands-on, I want you to understand two concepts, the concept of Git and the concept of GitHub. So Git is simply something which will help you to control the versions of your software. GitHub is where you will store all of these versions. So Git handles how the versions are created. GitHub is where all the versioning is stored. Make sense? All right, cool. Now let's go with a little bit of hands-on. So when you're contributing to any sort of open source repository, the first thing you want to do is create a fork. A fork of a project simply means you're creating an entire copy of this project. So in order to fork it, all I'm going to do is head over to the main repository, which is Leon's repository, and I'm going to create a fork of this. Once you click on create a fork, you will get this menu. All you have to do is create a fork. Now, I already have a fork of this created, so GitHub is not going to let me create a second fork unless I rename this repository to something else. But I am not going to do that because I don't want many repositories. So create your own fork. Simply click on the fork button and you can create a fork. Now let me come over to my fork of this repository. So right here, I am in my fork of this repository. Now, since I created this fork, the repository has been updated a little bit. So you can see that the README which I have in my fork and the README which is in Leon's repository, which is also called as the upstream, is different. Before moving forward, let me cover what is upstream. Now right here, I have created a fork, right? What is this fork from? This fork is from Leon's repository. So if Leon's repository has some sort of changes, those are what we called as upstream changes. So Leon's repository is the upstream. Now, if I want to get all those changes which is happening in the main repository, in the upstream repository, into my fork, I will simply come over to the sync fork button and I will click on update branch. And now I have the latest version of the repository. Now that I have this repository forked, I want to go ahead and make some changes. But as you already know, GitHub is a place where you write and store code. Now imagine me updating code right here itself without an IDE, without some kind of an auto sense. So in that case, I want to first create a local clone. Everything that exists within this repository, I want to bring that over to my local system. So for that, I am going to go ahead and clone this repository. Now in order to clone it, I need two things. Number one, I need the git CLI. I already mentioned this in the beginning. If you do not have the git CLI, go on to Google and check out Git and download the CLI for your operating system, whether it's Linux, whether it's a MacBook or Windows. Once you have that installed, you can continue further with this. The second thing which I need is the link to this repository. Now, right here, I can use this link, but we are not going to use this one. So in order to create a local copy of this repository, I'm going to come over here and click on code, and I'm going to copy this link right here. After I have this link, the second thing which I need to do is come over to my terminal in order to actually create a local copy of this repository. So let's go ahead and look at that. So right here, I'm in my terminal. Now notice that in the previous videos, I have always used WSL, but right here, I am in the simple Windows PowerShell. That's because I do not require the advanced capabilities that WSL provides me. I do not need the operators for this. I just need a simple shell. So in order to clone that repository, I'm going to type in git clone and I'm going to pass in the URL which I just copied. So this is the URL. Now if you take a close look at this URL is the exact same URL of my repository itself. So what's different between the two? Now, if I just enter the URL without the .git, it is still going to clone it because it already knows that this is a version of Git files. But if you have a Git format of files stored somewhere else and you do not pass in the .git, it's not going to know that what you're trying to clone is an actual Git based repository. So it might throw errors. The best practice is to always mention the .git at the end of your URL when you're cloning something. So let's go ahead and create a clone of this repository. Now that the clone has been created, I'm going to go ahead and open this up in VS Code. I'm opening it in VS Code just so that it becomes a lot simple to play around with all the files, create all the files which we need. If you're a Linux power user, if you're a power user of the shell, feel free to do it with Vim, but just for the sake of simplicity and so that everybody watching this is on the same page, I'm going to use VS Code. So I'm first going to navigate into my directory of Trekking Linux, and then I'm going to open it up in VS Code. So right here, I have it open in VS Code and I have only the README file, right? Again, the README file is the only thing which exists in this repository, which is why that is the only file which I have. Like I mentioned in the beginning, the file which I want to create is a very 101 FAQ type of file which explains what is Linux. So let me go ahead and create that file. Now, if you've used VS Code before, you already know how to create new files and folders. So I'm not going to waste some time explaining that to you. Instead, I'm just going to create a simple file. I'll call it linux.md. And within this file, I can make my changes. Now, if you look over on the left towards my entire explorer where all my files are listed, you can see that this linux.md is in green and it says U. what exactly is this U thing? Now over here, VS Code has this really good thing about source control, which is just a really good way to see all the files which have been changed. So over here, it tells me that this file has been changed. Now this U just means that a new file has been created. So I can create a commit about this. A commit is simply something to save the changes which you have made within your version control system. Your version control system is Git. Now you can go ahead and do it through this VS Code's interface itself, but that is quite straightforward. Instead, I am going to show you how to do it using the CLI. So right here, I am in my CLI, and on the left, I have this source control window open, just so you can see all the changes happening in real time. I am going to be using the CLI to do all of these changes. Now, before I talk about commits, let me talk about branches. So in order to explain branches, let me show it to you in a diagram. Now this one line here is one single branch. I can have certain changes on this branch and consider this as my main branch. This is where I will have my entire releases. Now I can have a second branch which moves parallelly with my first branch. At this point in time, I create this branch and all of the changes which existed within my main repository at this point will all be in the second branch as well. Now, once I have created all the changes I want in the second branch, I can merge it back with my main branch, my upstream branch. So this is just one of the best practices to use when working with Git. So I'm going to first create a new branch, and within that new branch, I'm going to commit the changes that I'm creating. So first, let's go ahead and create a new branch. So for that, I will do a git branch and I will name this branch as something. Let's say I'm going to name this branch as Linux-101. Now I can type git branch once again to see all of my branches. And you can see that I have two branches, the main branch and the Linux 101. Now this green star means that I am currently on my main branch. But this file which I have created, linux.md, I want to commit it onto the Linux 101 branch. So I will check out and go to that branch. For that, I will do git checkout and the name of my branch. So the name of my branch is Linux 101. And if I do a git branch once more, you can see that now I am on this git branch, this Linux 101 branch. Now that we have changed branches, let's see how we can commit it. Now for committing, there are two things which you need to do. Step one is staging your changes. So you just stage the changes before you commit them. Now staging is a place where you can just get a complete overview of everything that you have changed and everything that you're about to commit. Once you have confirmed that everything that you want to commit is correct and you have all the changes that you want, you will go ahead and write a commit message and you will commit it. So let's take a look at that in action. So first I will do git add and I will type the name of the file, which is linux.md over here. So this is going to add it to my staging. Now, if you look on the left, as soon as I enter this command, something's going to change on the left. Let's see that. So here, you see that this linux.md moved from changes to stage changes. So this file is currently in staging. Now, if I had something written within this file, I could go in there, I could see all of the contents, and I can edit them as I want. But right now it's completely empty. So all I'm going to do is create a commit of this linux.md file. So I can do git commit -m. Now this -m means a message. With every single commit, you need to add some sort of a message that, hey, I have created this changes within this particular commit. Now that helps you keep a track of all of the changes which you have created. So I will just do git commit -m and I'll put in a commit message and I can say add Linux 101 file and I press enter and it'll give me my commit. Now here it tells me a overview of everything that I've changed. So it just tells me that one file has been changed, no lines have been added, and nothing has been deleted. Now we are going to add some text within this file. And after that, we are going to make another commit which gives us all of the changes. So let's go ahead and do that. This is going to be a readme kind of a file. So we're going to use Markdown. If you don't know how to use Markdown, go onto YouTube and check literally any single guide. Using Markdown is quite straightforward. So I'm going to have two sections in here. Number one is what is Linux, and number two is where is Linux used. So within these two, I'm just going to add some brief description about both what is Linux and where is Linux used. So I'm going to do that and be right back. And after that, we'll look at what we can do next. All right, so right here, I have added in some sections about what exactly is Linux. You can see that I've added a couple of different things in here. Now, I'm not going to be formatting this quite well. Feel free to take up that issue. You can add some highlights to all of these Linux components. You can make other files as well explaining what each one of these components do, etc. And in order to learn that, you can either Google it, or I have already created some videos on a few of these. So you can watch those videos and learn about it and add to this repository. Okay, so I'm going to make a commit about this one change which I have created, and then I'm going to push this to my forked repository. So I've already talked about how you can make commits. So let us quickly go ahead and create a commit. I'm just going to do git add dot. The dot simply means add every single changed file to my staging. Now, for example, if I had, let's say 5 different files in here which I've changed, or 5 new files which I've created, then instead of typing each file name manually, I will just do a dot, which means add every single file to staging. Now, next I'm going to do is git commit, and my message is going to be feed add description about what is Linux, and I will commit it. And right here you can see that it tells me I have inserted 19 lines, which is correct because I have just 19 lines in here. Now I said that I want to push this changes to my forked repository. So for that, I'm going to do git push. Now in the graphical thing, you can see that there is a publish branch. It says publish branch because I have created this Linux 101 branch, and this Linux 101 branch does not exist in my fork. So in order to push this branch to my fork, all I have to do is type git push. All right, so with just a simple git push, you can see that it gives me the error that Linux 101 has no upstream branch. Now here, it considers the upstream as my forked repository. Okay, so in order to fix that, all it says is do this. Use a flag called set upstream origin Linux 101. So let's go ahead and copy this and paste it. And let's see what happens. And there, it has pushed all of these changes to my branch. How do I know it has been pushed? Let's head back to my forked repository and make sure that these changes exist. So right here, I'm back in my forked repository, and you can see that it says Linux 101 had recent pushes. So if I check out all my branches, there isn't a new branch over here. And it's obvious because again, I'm looking at an older version of my repository. Now in order to just get the latest version, all I have to do is refresh the page. I've refreshed the page, and now I can see that this Linux 101 branch exists, and it has my linux.md file. So let's go ahead and add this to the upstream. In this context, the upstream being Leon's repository. So I will do compare and pull request. Now a pull request simply means that every single changes which I have made in my repository, I want to merge it with the main repository. So in order to do that, the best practice is to create a pull request. Now we'll talk a little bit more about what exactly is a pull request in a little while, but first let's go ahead and create this pull request. So first two things I have to do before creating a pull request is give it a title and a description. So the title is created a Linux 101 file. That is the title of what changes I have done. Now within description, I just have to describe what changes does my pull request address. So what I have done is added a file explaining some of the basic concepts and components of a Linux based OS. That's all that I've done. Now, if I had done more things, for example, I created files around navigation, I created files around file management, around process management, I would mention all of those things within my description. Basically, I am addressing every single change which I have made within the PR description. Once that is done, I can go ahead and create a pull request. And right here, I have created the pull request. Now, I'm creating a pull request because whoever the maintainers of this project are, in this case, Leon, for example, they can come in here, they can see all of these files which have been changed, and they can give me reviews. For example, if they want to suggest something about the kernel, they can come here and they can leave certain reviews that, hey, this certain thing about this is wrong, let's change it in a particular way, and they can give me a review. Now, based on those reviews, I can make some changes over here. Now, there is one misconception about pull requests that you may have as a beginner. Suppose somebody has given you reviews that certain things need to be changed. How do you actually go ahead and change it? You come back to your fork in that particular branch. Now, within this branch itself, I can add in more commits, and those same commits will appear in my pull request as well. Let me show you hands on. Now, in this itself, I try to edit some sort of files. Let's say I change these grammatical mistakes, which my Grammarly extension is telling me to do. So I do that and I create another commit. And over here I say fixed grammatical errors. And I create the commit. Now I do not have to create a new PR. I have simply created a commit within my Linux 101 branch. That itself is going to reflect in the PR. So let's take a look. Over here, I come back and I check out my PR. And you can see that the commit is reflecting here once again, right? Then now you have officially created your very first pull request. The rest of the process is completely communication based. So Leon or some other maintainer is going to review my changes. They will figure out if this needs some sort of updates or not. If they think they needs updates, they will add the comments into this conversation. I will make those changes, and then once we are both satisfied with all of the changes, they will go ahead and merge this pull request, and it will be here in the upstream repository. So you have just seen how you can go ahead and make meaningful contributions to any sort of an open source repository. Now, further steps for you. Go ahead and check out Leon's repository. I will leave a link to the repository down in the description. You can go ahead and create your own contributions to it. You can use one of my previous videos to learn about Linux concepts and create a pull request within this repository. You can go ahead and create a couple of issues as well. This is how you can get started with your open source journey. This exact same procedure you can apply to different repositories as well and make your open source contributions. So if you have any questions about this, feel free to join our Discord server. The links are down in the description and you can discuss with us and solve your questions. So see you all in the next video.